Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we've got the workshop set up, so finally we're able to start doing some fabrication on the Nemesis. So those who are just tuning in, the Nemesis is a single-seater street-worthy car that we are building and having lots of fun doing it. One of the projects that I want to tackle is getting some strut braces on the back. So we ended up having to put some traditional strut mounts on the back instead of a pushrod suspension. So what I'm trying to do is reuse some of the different push rods and stuff to be able to create strut bars on the back. So typically we had essentially the rocker here that was using as a rocker for the push rods going into the bar going down to the actual wheels, and then another connection going onto the coilover suspension. So what I'm using is I'm actually going to try to use these adjustable rods here because they should provide a nice way of being able to adjust and create some strut bars or strut support on the back so we don't get any kind of flex. Now, one of the things that I did get as part of this is I have these extra braces here that were used for being able to essentially mount other different positions or the rockers onto the actual chassis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reuse these as pivotable connection points onto the actual chassis and just trying to find the right spots with them. Now, the one thing is they've got some tabs on here to hold them, but I'm going to have to cut and grind those off to get to our next step. Alright, now we got those brackets all cleaned up and ready to go. Just kind of loosely assembled everything here. Everything's put together really just with some temporary washers and stuff like that. Like there's some spacers will be made eventually to go in here. But we've got both of the different push rods adjusted to the same length. And now we can start to see and mock up where we might want to put them off of the rear suspension to create our strut bars. Now we can see how everything is mocked up on the rear here. I'm just using some zip ties until I can get some tack welds on there. But essentially we've marked our center point on our beam coming across and running both of our brackets from there. From there running our mounts up to the tops of the struts here for our coilovers. So everything runs all the way down. We shouldn't have any binding at all on any of these joints going down to that middle part there, but still being able to keep a fairly low profile below the shock towers here and going all the way down, leaving again low profile here, but enough clearance so that it's not going to get in the way of anything from the transmission. So everything should work up well here. Now it's just a matter of tacking and then fully welding these in place. And that has everything all finished up. I haven't welded in 2 years, so I need to get a little bit more practice. Flux core, so it wasn't even in MIG with the gas. Just getting everything on there. Everything's all welded in, all seam welded all around all the brackets. And so this should give us all sorts of nice support on the back. Everything will pop out, just a couple bolts, but then I don't have to worry about any kind of flex at all going on with any of the tube coming over here. It's all tied back and it's all low profile so that we're able to get the exhaust and everything coming out of the back here, because the turbo is likely going to sit right in that area there. But we'll have to get that mocked up as well, and then straight out to the exhaust running over the transmission that will come down here. So that's project one taken care of. Next up we'll be building in some rails on the bottom here, something better than this flimsy little pieces of steel to be able to hold the seat and to hold the gas tank on the bottom. So it's all nice and secure and gives me something to secure a bottom plate on here. So the bottom plate will likely be some thick aluminum, basically the same kind of underside that you'd see on a rally car for a skid plate. So we're going to put that on the bottom to be able to make sure everything doesn't come up through the floorboards on me if I'm on the highway and hit a 2x4 or something hits there that, you know, I don't have something coming up into my crotch. So we're going to get working on that next and see how it goes. Next up, we're going to be working on getting our floor mounts in for our gas tank and for the seats. So created kind of an H pattern here. The idea is this is going to kind of slide in. Gas tank is going to sit on the back here. The cross brace is going to give some support on the front. Braces on the back or the sides are going to give support as well. And then I'll end up welding in some nuts in here so that these can thread down, and some brackets on the side for it to be able to connect into. What will happen up here is there's going to be a beam that goes right across that connects up in the front of the car. And then I'll be working through how I'm going to be able to create the mounting points in here for the seat itself. So there might be some cross rails this way or rails going the other way. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do that yet. But that's the general idea. I'm going to put some studs on those and get that all welded in and figure out how I'm going to notch this back into the back. So we'll get started and get this welded. Now that we've got everything welded up, I just have it laying in place here. You can see the bars coming across with those temporary supports at the bottom where my foot is there. So these temporary straps here will end up coming out. Just have them setting it on it right now just to see if I can get it centered. Of course, at the back here, I'm going to have to notch each of these corners to get it to fit back in. So I need to make a few cuts there and see if I can get those to sit nice and flush so that I can weld that seam. But that's the next step, is just notching those guys out, cutting a corner out of them, and then seeing if I can push that back in there. I should hopefully push back about the depth of those cylinders. So those are actually used for bolting the car down onto the frame rig, so that we can keep everything straight when we were doing the fabrication. So we're leaving those in there just in case we ever want to bolt it back on and do any kind of framework. And then we'll run a new bar across here and then figure out how I'm going to put in the seat mount. So I'll likely do the seat mounts and stuff and get all that figured out outside and then weld everything in once it's all done. After a few trips back and forth from the cutting wheel and grinder, we're able to get these notched out and ready to be able to weld in there. So we've got everything flush at the back, which was cool. One thing that I had to do as well is, you'll notice right in there, is that there's actually a slot that I had to cut as well for that other piece to be able to notch back in there. So a little bit of tinkering around, but managed to get it to go. So now it's really about figuring out where and how I'm going to set up the rails for the seat and that cross piece that's in the bottom there. So we need to figure out exactly where the seat is going to sit. I'm probably going to drill and put some studs coming up out of it to fit into the rails of the bottom of the seat, which are sitting over here by the gas tank. So essentially, I'm going to measure and drill out a couple of the different spots on here that I'm going to put a stud up through, and that's what we'll mount the seat onto, and then just slide in some nuts on the front and the back of it, and we should be able to get everything good to go. So that's the next step, is let's measure that out and create some kind of bracing to go into the bottom of this H ladder here. And then we should be able to button it all up. Now we have the whole frame assembled. Essentially, I've lined up cross beams across the same steel that we were looking at before, lining up with the very first bolt hole at the front of the rail, and lining up with the very last bolt hole of the frame. So this is going to allow us to be able to secure in the gas tank, secure in the frame rails, and then slide the seat down in and tighten the size of the frame rails onto the actual seat itself. So that's going to be kind of the assembly order that goes in here, because it's really difficult to get to all of these different mounting holes on the back while trying to put the tank in and then get to that hole to secure the seat. So being able to have the seat removed from the actual rails and then just kind of wiggle it down in between the rails and fasten it on here is how we're going to get everything all to line up. So last part is welding in these H rails in here, or the side rails that are coming across. And then I need to probably weld on some studs onto those to be able to get the rails on top of them. And then I also need to weld in some nuts for being able to do the gas tank to be able to connect. So that's the next part of fabrication fun. Okay, so this is about what we've got done for today. So we managed to get the strut bars at the back, and we've got our ladder all ready to go in here for the seat mounts and the gas tank mounts. So everything's got cut. Managed to get the bar that goes across here. It hasn't been welded yet. I'm going to make sure that I put all of the studs for the seats across those crossbars, and then also weld in some nuts back in here for the front of the gas tank to connect. And then I'm going to need to do something at the back here for the side tabs of the gas tank as well, to make sure that everything fits in perfectly and has mounting spots all over the place. So that will be the goal for the next one, or tomorrow, get that stuff finished up. So that should get us pretty good for being able to have the seat and the gas tank mount, and then we'll start to look at how we actually mount in the engine and disassemble stuff on the back, because the next step after that is figuring out how in the heck I want to make the engine and the intercooler fit in the back of the vehicle. So that's going to be interesting. I don't know how much clearance I'm going to have, but I'll start by finishing off those floor mounts for everything so it's all buttoned up and ready to go. So that's all I got done for today. Stay tuned for the next little bit of progress.